Hi, Varun. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks a lot, Karan. Happy to be here.
Right. So, for everyone listening, Varun is currently a product marketing lead at Google. He is a unique person who actually went from software engineering to data engineering to then product marketing in Salesforce, Google, and other places. So, he has a decade plus of experience in B2B product marketing. So, Varun, welcome to the show. And first question, how did you switch from engineering to product marketing?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I think I first started as a software engineer, was a computer science undergrad, was with Cisco for a couple of years. And I think, like most people who start off in engineering, I was focused on the initial problem itself. What are we trying to solve? Essentially, what is my code turning into? What I like to think of is code to value. Like, what is the line of code that you're writing, and what is the value it's adding to the world? I started pulling on that thread a little bit more. So, essentially, trying to see where is this piece of code sitting. Especially, it was easier in some place like Cisco because I knew it was sitting in a piece of router, and I want to see how people were interacting with that product, how that's making a difference. Specifically, what behavioral change is my code piece of code driving, and that is what prompted me to make a switch even further. Essentially, move into Goldman Sachs to see, can I close the loop to understand that further. Now I know there is a behavioral change. Is there a monetary change? So is my piece of code changing something financially in the ecosystem in the world? Again, I started to pull on that a little bit further to see, let's actually move away from code. What else can I do to actually create these both behavioral and monetary changes? Eventually, I started getting interested in stories. Essentially, code is one piece of the puzzle, but can you also combine a very efficient piece of code with a very compelling story to drive both behavioral and monetary changes? So that is how I made the switch. I guess I see the science in storytelling and both the stories in science as well.
Beautiful. No, I mean, we have a ton of engineers who are actually, in fact, in my last startup, there were a bunch of IITians who actually made the biggest content channel in India and
That's TVF, right?
yes,
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
right. And
Yeah.
thanks. And now you are doing this, which is great. So, Varun, tell us more about so product marketing. Different people have different white elephant definitions of product marketing. Help us figure out that white elephant. What is product marketing from your perspective, right? What from your lens, and what is it supposed to do?
The way I see it, I break it down into two pieces. So, what am I responsible for? What do I do day to day? Pulling on the first thread, like what am I responsible for? I see product marketing. The closest analogy I can think of is uh, every software system has a monitoring software. So, that actually looks at the end to end supply chain of either a software or a business and tries to point out, oh, there is a leakage point here, probably you need to pay attention here and maybe do something to fix it. So that ideally should be taken up by a product marketer because you are the interface for the go to market. So you know how the distribution is working and you are very closely tied at the hip with either a product manager or even the engineering teams in some cases. So you know how the build side is working. Essentially, you need to have a point of view on the end to end, again, from code to value and be able to identify what is the leakage point and basically then marshal the resources or probably convince everyone around you in the company to focus on that resource. Essentially, have a hypothesis on whether let's say this is why there is a revenue drop or a growth drop, and then let's change strategies, change focus, and move in that direction. This is from the responsibility side. From the role side, like I said, it all starts uh, at least working as a product marketer in a few different companies. I see both product management and product marketing on the same spectrum. Different companies draw the line at different places, but as a combined set of responsibilities, they both should sit on the same spectrum. So PM should be the interface for engineers, being the voice of what's happening in the distribution channel, in the outside world, what customers think about it. And PMMs should be the voice of truth, giving that to the PMs. Although they speak to customers, let's say they'll only have time to speak to, let's say, 10 to 15 customers. But we should have a point of view on the market, basically creating that complementary knowledge, not just people using our product, but let's say, what do people think about competitors' products? What are the new opportunities in the market? So that is like the role of PMM to PM interaction. On
And
the
what?
other side, sorry.
Sorry. No, please go ahead.
On the other side, we should become the voice of builders in the rest of the organization that is responsible for distribution. So essentially, what is the story? At the end of the day, every product is trying to tell you a story. So although we might have a lot of fancy metrics about measuring what is customer success or how many customers are we buying, eventually a customer's purchasing decision is driven by an emotion. Either it's a signal of trust, either it's a signal of need, but what is the story of a piece of code that is driving this emotion? So that is the job of a PMM, messaging.
So, uh, I'll ask more questions on this, but one thing I've
Yeah,
seen is sometimes product people are like, hey, we do all the product building and the messaging on that side. And marketing people are like, hey, we own all the distribution and copy. These guys are just sitting in the middle and not really adding too much value. Like, what would you say to those guys?
I attribute some part of my answer that I'm about to say with the kind of esoteric career that I've had. Like, I've had multiple different hats, both engineering, product, and eventually product marketing. So throughout my career, I've had a constant identity crisis. I'm not a traditional marketer. I'm not a traditional engineer. I'm not a traditional product person. But also, that gives me an advantage to empathize with the other problems. So I kind of blur the lines between what I feel ownership of. So somehow it becomes end to end success of the product. That is the easiest thing for me to feel ownership of. If you start with some hypothesis like that, where you're genuinely feeling end to end ownership, these kind of questions will stop mattering, because beyond what's written on paper as your job description, you start to bleed in to other functions to start to provide value where you know best. There are places where I've sat in like sprint meetings where it's weird, right? Like, why do you have a marketer? I'm not there to build some slides, but there is a unique point of view that I'm bringing at that particular moment.
So
So
what are the KPIs you
yeah,
will chase, right? Like, give me like the impact KPIs, saying, hey, because the product marketing team is here, they will own all the marketing around the product, and will you own product engagement KPIs? Will you own product adoption KPIs, like distribution KPIs? What are the KPIs you guys own?
that's a beautiful question. And if two different PMMs are giving you the same answer, don't believe them. That means but throughout my experiences, and especially talking to some of the founders in the Valley and VCs, etc., I found there is one comprehensive method or approach to identifying the right KPIs. Let's say, again, in the traditional sense, if we look at the broader funnel, so in the simplest terms, how many people have heard about your product? How many people are interested in your product? How many people are using your product? And how many people are your fans? So
Hmm.
that they become the referrals. So these are the four segments, and every PMM should own one piece of each of these stages. Like,
Mhm.
do we own a KPI that says how many people know about our product or have heard about our product? And depending on what product or how you're selling it, the actual number might be different. Let's say if you're a true PLG company, that means you're measuring something like website views or even social impressions, etc. But if you're a company that is selling software worth $100,000, then probably you need to look for something like number of mentions in the media or number of mentions, number of PR articles that you're able to generate. And in the second stage, yeah,
Right? Why would marketing not own it? Like, what are the things that you guys exclusively own? Right? So, like, where do you draw the line saying this is owned by product, this is
yeah,
owned by marketing, and this is owned by us, the product marketing team?
I would say there will be something like a hero metric where what is this one North Star metric that you're running behind? And everything is accountability metric. Basically, you also have a shared ownership. Let's say the PR metric is something that I'll share ownership with my marketing peers. Again, at the same level, the usage metric, number of customers that are signing up to our product, is something I closely share with the PM. But let's say the objective in the last two roles, my objective was to set up a product led growth motion from ground up. So you'll call that successful if you have customers signing up to use the product at the end of the day. So that
Can
was my North Star metric.
can you talk a little bit about this grounds up building out the PLG motion and the metric around that? Like, can you give us like some ballpark things of how you did it, what worked for you, what were your learnings?
So whenever a company decides to actually talk down market, essentially move down market, let's say you have a success already in your enterprise segment and you start to move down market, they'll start to run into some interesting observations. Basically, enterprises and direct developers or probably SMBs behave very differently in terms of purchasing decisions. They want to try and have a feel of the product before they actually make a decision instead of going through these long sales cycles. So these are the two use cases that I ran into. Essentially, we were leaders in the enterprise segment and you had to move down market and you had to actually start to talk to a different customer segment. So when you're doing something like that, the way you actually reach or probably the way you build awareness for the product needs to be different. The way they experience the product needs to be different. And the way they start using the product also needs to be different. Specifically, what you're optimizing for is how can you showcase value without being in the equation. Like they should not be able to talk to, they should not have a need to talk to anyone. Essentially, they should hear about you on, let's say, something like LinkedIn, and they should get interested. They should come to your product, explore, try it out, and it should hit them. Like, voila, yeah, I get this. I get why this is a product. I get why this is a need. I want to start using it. So, if all of this is working in unison and in success, and it's driving success, that is when there is something called a product led growth motion. Yeah.
Any examples you can quote, like, hey, some of the things which at Salesforce or Google, like any
Yeah.
example comes to mind?
Yes. Yeah. The Salesforce, the biggest example is Slack. So, Slack, I think, is one of the biggest success stories that people talk about when they talk about PLG. Essentially, the way they specifically started by talking to individuals first. They started with gamers, I think. In fact, they started selling the software to gamers, and then eventually it expanded into either individuals or small teams where you want to have interactions between different people in the company. But that expanded very organically into their enterprise offering, which is entire enterprises actually live and breathe on Slack. There are use cases where, let's say, if you open your software and you actually open your laptop and you can't see Slack working immediately, and the company freezes at some point. It provides such tremendous value, and it's very perceivable. You see that as an individual. So that is like one of the biggest examples I can get.
Varun, we also saw you are an advisor to products that count.
Hmm.
Right? How help us understand also, like, so product marketing, right? Like
Hmm.
what you've been talking about. Uh,
Yeah.
how does this fit into figuring out PMF, and what is the right time to bring in product marketing into an organization?
The If I were to go with the easiest answer, right time to bring in the right time to bring in a product marketer is always once you figured out a PMF
Right.
already. So until then, founder should play the role. So even thinking beyond that, what a founder should look for is not specifically PMF as a concept. Is there an immediate and urgent need for the solution that I am providing to a customer? And is this problem big enough for me to spend my next 10 years? So if you've figured out or tested that hypothesis, that is when you start to think about uh, efficiency and scale. That is when a product marketer comes into the equation, where you can't do everything, or you can't put the onus on sales to actually figure out everything, or even the engineers to do everything. So you need someone to start looking at the end-to-end funnel and figuring out how you distribute the product. How do you grow the distribution channel? So that is when a product marketer should come in.
Right. And if you were to hire people in your team, what are the characteristics which you'd look for? What walk us through the the playbook of hiring great PMMs?
I'll answer this in two parts. What is their motivation in general? I'm not talking about like what is your company motivation or compensation, etc. But as a product marketer, what is the one thing that you're running behind? If it's a given metric or a KPI, that is incomplete for me. So it should ideally be something so qualitative that you find it hard to articulate. So specifically, if a product marketer is obsessed about figuring out customer trust, like why do customers trust us, why does this particular persona uh, continue using our product, or probably why did they even sign up to our page? So if they're running behind something as fundamental as customer trust, uh, so that is a very good sign, because then the actual KPI that you have, that you take as a North Star, doesn't matter. Your intention is in the right place. You're always going back to first principles to actually ask the right questions. And the second piece is, even when you're messaging for a product, again, going back to first principles, are you thinking about how should I tell a product story that pulls an emotional cord on someone? So if you're thinking at that level, that means uh, you have a good person or on your team. So, and beyond that, of course, there are other aspects like, oh, do they know, essentially, do they have some expertise in the software or the industry that we're in, etc., etc. The second thing is approach. That's a really good question again. Specifically, if I talk about PMF, uh, it's a very incomplete way of looking at it. It's a lagging indicator. It's tough to operationalize. It's tough to even identify. If you actually uh, see most of the internet, they talk about PMF as this mythical unicorn, as in uh, most of the people don't know when you have it. You'll get to know when you have it. But can you put science to it to actually break it down? So instead of calling it just PMF, what is the actual problem that we're trying to solve? And how are we reaching those customers? And essentially, what is the way they are purchasing the product? And what is the fundamental story you're telling? So basically, breaking it down into those fundamental aspects, if you have that muscle, then you have a great PMM on your hands.
Right. And Varun, can you talk about like some examples either from Google and Salesforce, your experiences, or others where you have seen beautiful product marketing work being done, like companies you appreciate on product marketing side, and why?
That that's an interesting question. So it's unfair to actually call like a comprehensive work of a product marketer as good or bad, because it depends on the company situation. They still have to serve the company. But I'll give you three different examples of where I've noticed three aspects of a product marketing job done supremely well. Let's probably start with, actually, it might be topical as well. Let's start with Apple. Uh, it, have you seen the advertisement of Vision Pro?
Yes.
The new. So if you notice, throughout the video, they have like an 8-minute video, which is like a masterclass in, I guess, messaging, the messaging aspect of a product marketing job. They never once use the word called augmented reality, or they never actually bring out any jargon. And simple ways which they explain uh, fundamental change in behavior. Let's say they talk about pinch and zoom, right? Do we even know when pinch and zoom became a thing? So this is the essence of messaging in product marketing job. When you actually say it, it will not sound some like it's something profound, but it actually influences behavior. The way they've explained like the entire Vision Pro on how a user behavior should be is a masterclass in messaging. Basically, you use the most simplest language possible, but you say just the right things so that your behavior starts to tilt a little bit. So that is like the messaging aspect of product marketing, especially something moving into the other aspects, the mechanics of it. Like, especially, I've been at both Google and Salesforce, and both of these places follow different ways to define accountability and metrics, but they are super comprehensive. So everything you do, like I keep going back to the same thing, code to value. The way you're actually measuring your activities, whether you're improving the value in the world or whether you're not, it's very easy to build that feedback loop. So this is the second aspect of product marketing job that I really value. How quick or basically how good is your feedback loop that you build for yourself? That involves things like metrics, rapid iteration, and testing something out, having the right audience to test it with, etc., etc. So these companies have like mastered the art in that.
Awesome. That's a great example. Tell us more about, on the tool side, like which
Mhm.
tools do product marketeers swear by? Right? Like your example and your understanding of the world. What are some of the tools which are used day in day out, and why they loved?
That's an interesting question. And the reason it's so interesting is because the tool chain itself varies differently. If I may, I'll probably slightly switch it up and uh, answer in terms of segments. Let's again break down the core aspects of product marketing job into three aspects. You have messaging, you have iterations, and you have measurement. So you need to have a tool that is basically assisting you in getting to some place.
Right.
Specifically, something as fundamental as messaging, more than a tool, you need to have a structure that you're actually approaching it with. It can be different frameworks. Product Marketing Alliance actually provides different frameworks. Different tools are actually there to help you refine your messaging, etc. The fundamental ask there is, what is the simple framework that you're make that you're using to make sure your messaging is actually polished or actually correct, and that actually brings alignment across the company, because it's not you writing a story on your silo. Everyone needs to be bought into that story inside your company. But the second and third is where actual tools come in. So iteration, it's of course super topical, but I would suggest picking the right AI tool that helps you do the job. Let's say if you figured out your channel is something like video, or maybe even something like social, a combination of something, a visual, something, an AI tool that creates visuals like either Midjourney or Gemini or GPT, and a text-based tool should become your best friend. That will let you shorten the feedback loop really, really quickly. So you can iterate as much as possible, put stuff out into the world so that you get feedback and then you refine your thought process. So AI tools, I would say everyone is starting to pick different ones based on their comfort, their need, and even the tools capabilities. I personally use Gemini, so that fits most of my needs.
Do you have
And
an option?
yeah, I do. Actually, a
Uh,
lot of people in our company use like their own things. Again, it depends on like what exactly are you testing out. Mine's little text based, so this is where I ended up with. But yeah, to your question, actually we do.
all right, that's good to
Uh,
know.
the last piece is more important, which is measurement. This is where I think people rely on most tools to actually bring. And the fundamental thing that you're trying to do is you're trying to bring stuff together in one place. Just have one dashboard. Just don't have like 100, right? So so that you don't stop look so that you'll stop looking at everything. Just have one place that not just we as PMMs, but we are able to share that with everyone else in the company so that we are held accountable. So the biggest piece that you're trying to do with that piece of metrics is accountability. Either use things like Looker, or even you can start with something as simple as Drive. I've seen like some of the startups that I use just do this in like sheets, right? So the fundamental ask there is, have one place where you can put down the metrics, measure what you're doing, and just feel accountable for it.
Varun, this dashboard is interesting, right? Is this like the product usage dashboard you're talking about, or the website
No,
visitor dashboard?
no. That is where I'll probably go back to the first thing that I mentioned. It needs to be a combination of four metrics that capture four different things. Like how many people know about your
Yeah,
product.
yeah.
The second, how many people are interested, which is pipeline usage. Basically, that will be MQLs, all those. The third piece is how many people are actually using it. There's a number of users, or you might have nuanced ones like number of some metric that talks about usage, and number of fans. How many people are advocates of your product? Do you have a community that you're trying to measure, or do you have number of referrals that you're trying to measure? So something that represents one among these four segments should be existing in your life as
Right,
an
but like
accountability metric.
like the awareness side, the pendos, and others, right? Google Analytics, Mixpanel. The
Yeah,
product usage side, you have like Segment and others, right?
yeah.
Um, how do you bring them together into a single dashboard? Like, is there a company which does that, or you're just building your own tools for that?
I'm pretty sure there must be, but it was different tooling. Like in Salesforce, it was actually Salesforce. That's what we
Right.
used to do. That's what we used to use. In Google, it's a little bit of mix and match because we do have things like Looker where we pull in our data into. The key aspect of it, or the key aspect of the decision, is what is the core metric that you're running behind. Like
Right.
Salesforce was had a well-oiled sales machine that actually worked out of Salesforce itself. So it was easiest for us to actually put most of our information there. Yeah. So I
Right.
think pick what is the place where you're spending your majority time on, and just build a dashboard on top of that infra layer.
Understood. And one last question, right? How do you work with like SDRs, BDRs, AEs to help them with their reach out messaging, which converts? Do you guys do any of that? Is that on your KPI, saying help them with the scripting, like sales reach out or like inside sales reach out to get qualified meetings?
Yeah. In fact, I'll answer the that and the question behind the question as well. Like, let's say if you're selling anything that requires high touch, if you think about it fundamentally, why people still need salespeople is because, again, that signal of trust. I don't trust a website or a software well enough that I'll sign $100,000 contract just by giving out some details on a website. I need to talk to someone. I need to hold someone accountable. So it all starts there. So if that is the product or business that you're in, your entire focus should be arming your sales teams.
Right.
But if you're actually selling software worth like $2, so then it changes. In that case, let's say if everything is done through sales, and we'll do everything to actually support the sales teams, not just a product marketer, but even the product management, and even engineering should actually be helping out so close a deal, because that's the value. That's where the value is.
Great. Thanks, Varun. This was engaging and insightful. I
Yeah,
really enjoyed the conversation
yeah,
and
this is
look forward to
awesome.
keep.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Yep, absolutely. Look forward to keeping in touch. Hopefully, people saw value in the four aspects you talked about and the frameworks you shared with us, right? And I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thank you so much.